I will not keep my mouth shut. Powerful words, aren't they? They're from a survivor, and they reach across decades to make a demand, really. A demand that we listen to a story that was deliberately buried, a catastrophe that was silenced for years. So today we're diving into this forgotten piece of Texas history. It's an incredible story, part scientific discovery, part historical detective work, and all about the fight to remember people whose lives were just systematically erased. All right, let's set the scene. It's 1891, just outside Austin, Texas. You've got this guy, a Union veteran named Samuel Hargrove. He's out there digging a foundation for a new barn, and then, clink, his shovel hits something. And it's not a rock. It's unmistakably human bone. So he keeps digging, a lot more carefully now. And what he finds is just horrifying. It's not one body. It's 17. 17 distinct skeletons, all just piled together in a single, shallow, unmarked trench. And right away, there's a conflict. The local sheriff shows up and just dismisses it. Oh, it's just an old slave grave, he says. Probably a disease outbreak. But Hargrove, he'd seen mass graves in the war. He knew something was off. The bones all showed the exact same level of decay. That tells you all 17 of these people died and were buried at the same moment. This wasn't a disease that kills over weeks. No, this was something else entirely. Okay, now fast forward 3 years. We're about 200 miles away near Beaumont, and believe it or not, it happens again. Another mass grave is found, this one with 22 bodies. But this time, a very unique and determined expert gets called in. And this is her, Dr. Catherine Brennan. Now you've got to remember, this is a time when female physicians were incredibly rare. But she wasn't just a doctor, she was a pioneer in forensic analysis. She was known for being super meticulous, and she just refused to accept easy answers. Honestly, she was the perfect person to start unraveling this whole thing. Dr. Brennan had this method that was, for its time, pretty cutting edge. She analyzed the chemical signatures in the victim's teeth. By measuring how many minerals from the soil had been absorbed into the teeth, she could get a rough idea of not just when they died, but the specific time frame they were all buried in. And her results? They were a total bombshell. Her analysis proved what that veteran, Samuel Hargrove, had suspected all along. All 22 people were buried at pretty much the exact same time, somewhere back in the late 1850s. So case closed on the disease outbreak theory. This was a single, sudden, catastrophic event. So Dr. Brennan does what any good scientist does. She publishes her technical findings. And kind of unexpectedly, her paper finds its way to a guy named Thomas Gaines. Now, Gaines was a land surveyor, and get this, he'd been coming across these same kinds of disturbing sites for years, all over East Texas. Turns out, Gaines had already documented 17 of these mass grave sites completely on his own. So you add his 17 to Brennan's 2 discoveries, and suddenly they're looking at a pattern of 19 sites. This was absolutely not an isolated incident anymore. So naturally, Brennan and Gaines team up. It was a perfect match, really. Her scientific methods and his surveyor's precision. For the next year, they traveled all over Texas, and their fieldwork, well, it doubled the number of known sites. They're up to 38 now. The scale of this thing was just becoming terrifyingly clear. And this is where the numbers get just staggering. They run the estimates, and the death toll is now over 800 people. You see, this wasn't just a series of awful tragedies. It was starting to look a lot like a coordinated, systematic cover-up stretching across dozens of plantations. But the big questions remained. What on earth could have caused this, and why would anyone hide it? Brennan hits the state archives, but it's like any record of a mass death event from the 1850s has just vanished. Poof! She finds absolutely nothing until a tiny little article buried deep in an old newspaper gives her the first real clue. It's this little piece from December 1859. It talks about a peculiar atmospheric disturbance that killed a bunch of livestock. And the symptoms? Respiratory distress. It even gives a specific date, December 1st. And then it mentions a local doctor, a Dr. Samuel Whitfield, who was looking into it. So Brennan, being the incredible detective she is, actually manages to track down Dr. Whitfield's widow. And the widow gives her access to his private medical journals. And right there, inside those pages, she found it, the truth. the story he was too afraid to ever publish. Dr. Whitfield's journal confirmed everything. He wrote that on the night of December 1st, 1859, dozens of enslaved people died from asphyxiation. But here's the kicker. He also revealed a conspiracy. He wrote that the plantation owners all met and, quote, agreed collectively to keep the matter quiet. They pressured him into silence. His final entry, it's just this haunting admission of the choice he made. So, wow, Brennan now has solid proof of a cover-up. But she still needs to know what happened that night. What was this atmospheric disturbance? For that, she needed a totally different kind of expert. So she reached out to a young geologist named Dr. Raymond Foster. And Dr. Foster is the one who finally puts all the pieces of the puzzle together. His theory? A small earthquake a few months earlier had fractured the rock along a major fault line. This let toxic, heavier-than-air gases build up in underground pockets. Then, on that specific night, a sudden, sharp, cold front rolled in. That change in pressure basically squeezed the gas out of the ground, where it settled like a lethal, invisible blanket, right in the low-lying areas where the slave quarters were always built. So the science explained the what, but it was the survivor testimonies, which Brennan painstakingly tracked down in old church archives, that revealed the horrific human cost. A survivor named Rachel Porter described how the plantation owner forced her to help load bodies into a wagon, the bodies of her own mother, her sister, her friends. And another survivor, Nathaniel Cooper, he really got to the heart of the cover-up. He actually overheard the plantation owners meeting. And what were they worried about? Not the human tragedy. It was the financial liability. They didn't see hundreds of dead people. They saw a loss of property value that had to be hidden fast. Now, you can probably guess what happened next. Brennan and Foster faced a ton of backlash, even threats from the descendants of these powerful families. But they didn't back down. They published their complete findings, determined to get the truth out there and, most importantly, to honor the victims. And their legacy is, well, it's profound. Their work eventually led to identifying 73 burial sites and documenting over 600 deaths. They saved those survivor testimonies from being lost forever. And they inspired the historical markers that stand today, making sure the story of both natural disaster and unbelievable human cruelty would never be forgotten again. Remember Rachel Porter, the survivor? She fought so hard to make sure people remembered the names of those she lost. Her mother, Sarah Porter, her little sister, also named Sarah, her grandmother, Rose Hamilton, her cousins, James and William, and her friend, Rose. These are just a handful of the hundreds whose names were almost completely erased from history. You know, the story of the Poison Night was a silent catastrophe, and it was only brought to light because a few really determined people refused to accept that silence. And it really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? How many other histories, how many other truths are still out there, just beneath the surface, waiting for someone with the courage to start digging?